The Zoo Story is the 12th episode of the 5th season of Frasier. This is directed by Pamela Fryman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a really decent episode. It starts off with KCL. Frasier is there, and Bebe happens to be there, and it turns out Bebe is actually meeting Roz because she's helping Roz advance her career, and it's also time for negotiating new contracts, so Bebe is going to be helping Roz with that. Frasier, however, is going to find another agent. It was quite a while ago, quite a few episodes ago, where Frasier decided to cut ties with Bebe, and of course, now it's time for him to find an agent so he can negotiate a good contract, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. We're then at the apartment, and Niles comes over. First of all, he's having trouble with Maris, obviously. Maris wants to fire their latest couples therapist, but Frasier tells Niles to stand his ground because if they just keep firing the therapists, they're never going to get anywhere. And that's kind of the subplot here with Niles trying to not give in to Maris's demands. And we'll come back to that again in a little bit. Frasier then says that his new agent is about to come over, and he says that actually he's an ethical agent. And Martin points out that there's no such thing as an ethical agent. Knock at the door, Ben arrives, he's played by Robert Stanton, and the first thing he says is that he was making his last Meals on Wheels delivery and swerved to avoid a pigeon. And then pretty much everything that comes out of his mouth for a good few minutes paints him in a very, very positive light. And he has an idea for Frasier, which I have to say sounds pretty great, because a zoo has just got a new crane, and he convinced them to call it Frasier Crane, and it would be good publicity for Frasier to go down to the zoo and meet with Frasier Crane, the crane, and the crane would meet Frasier. And seems like a fun idea. We could immediately to the zoo. And it also happens that Roz and Bebe are there, which was a little bit random. I don't feel like that made a lot of sense, but I didn't mind them being in the scene. Certainly I enjoyed Roz's facial expressions when Frasier was giving his speech. Unfortunately, while Frasier is giving his speech, Martin is looking at the food on the food table, buffet table, and he's talking to the crane who's in a cage behind him, basically telling the crane that these are people food, you can't have this. And he gives the cage a nudge with his cane, and the crane gets out. And Martin kind of chases after the crane as it runs behind Frasier. Honestly, the crane running behind Frasier I didn't think was as funny as I was meant to find it. But Martin running after the crane I really enjoyed a lot. And needless to say, the crane attacking Martin was an absolute disaster for everybody except Niles. Because we then cut to the next scene in the apartment. Niles comes over, Frasier answers the door, and Niles just starts laughing. And I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. There's a competition on the radio to create the best Frasier Crane jokes, and I know I said spoilers, but I won't give away the joke that Niles shares, but I rather enjoyed it. I'm glad Niles was getting some fun out of it. Unfortunately, Niles still wants, or Maris rather, wants Niles to still let go of that therapist, and then there's a phone call, it's Roz. The manager is not negotiating the contract. It's actually going to be somebody they've brought in called the Hammer, which I think tells you all you need to know about how difficult they are for negotiations. And Ben then comes over and he says that he does have a plan to restore Frasier's image. And this is, I have to say, I wish we'd seen it, but he brings out this tiny therapist's couch, which of course he made himself. When he makes children's toys, he's got this workshop set up for that, so of course he had the supplies to make this tiny couch, which I just thought was adorable. And we then cut immediately to Cafe Nervosa. Unfortunately, we don't actually get to see the crane on the couch, but we get to see something else adorable with it, but I'll come back to that at the end. And we're in KCL. Frasier has a bandage on his head. Clearly it didn't go well with the crane on the couch. And Gil then comes in. The Hammer has slashed his salary, which is not great to hear. And then immediately after, Roz and Bebe come in celebrating because Roz has had a pay rise and also other career opportunities. So clearly Bebe was, credit to Bebe, she may be ruthless. She's very good at doing her job. And she then follows Frasier into the men's room. And I have to say, it was dramatic and funny. She's looking at Frasier, who's looking at himself in the mirror, and she describes all of the chaos that has happened. And when she emphasised that Ben had done all that damage in 3 days, honestly, I found it to be very, very funny, very dramatic, and really helped to highlight that actually Ben had caused a lot of problems in a very short space of time. Frasier, I think it was predictable, ultimately ends up signing with Bebe again. And we find out that she's promised to change her ways and that she won't do things as slyly as she usually does. And we find out just as she's saying that the crane died because somebody fed it a jawbreaker or a gobstopper. I can't remember the term they used, but definitely. Well, it was funny. Obviously, doing that to an animal I don't condone, but in the moment, Bebe's reaction was pretty entertaining. Niles at this point has skipped out of Cafe Nervosa because since Frasier has let his morals go and is signing with Bebe, he can then go with Maris and fire the couple's therapist, and that will mean that she will have sex with him again. So Niles has fled the scene quite delightfully. He's very happy now, and maybe happy is not the right thing he's feeling. Relief, excitement, anticipation, I don't know. Either way, the final scene is absolutely adorable. The final scene is in the apartment with Eddie on the couch, on the tiny therapist's couch, with Daphne sitting behind him or beside him, being his therapist. And Frasier comes along and thwacks Daphne on the head with a book, I think. But it was just a very adorable, very, very adorable scene. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. I haven't seen this, but it wouldn't surprise me if they used that as a promo image, or if some magazine decided to do a promo shot for an upcoming Frasier season with Eddie on the couch. I just googled it, I can't see any evidence of that, but that would have been adorable. Definitely a very sweet way. Also, when you Google Eddie on the therapist's couch, there are so many, so many cute images of Eddie, and the one. Actually, I won't spoil it. Don't do it if you've not seen every episode yet. But definitely very, very sweet. This is a really solid episode. Personal highlights would have to be, well, I guess just the creation of the character of Ben, how Ben is written, the performance. I think he was a very well written character. Not for Frasier, but certainly I like the character. Martin chasing after the crane. Evidently, I enjoyed that a lot. And Bebe pointing out all of the damage Ben had done in 3 days. And then, of course, ending with Eddie on the little couch was definitely very cute. So, needless to say, I enjoyed this episode a lot. I should say as well, I'm not a fan of Bebe in the way that some people are. I don't mind the character. I think the performance is great. Actually, that's a spoiler for the latest season of Frasier, so I'll say no more. But I'm not as excited about Bebe as a character as some people are, but I do think the performance is great, very well written character, and this really comes across in this episode. The Zoo story is ultimately a really fun, very well done episode of Frasier.